So, the useless housekeeper has finally decided to leave. You were just here to take care of Liam until he got into college. It'll be nice to have more space once this parasite is gone. Their laughter filled the air like cold wind. I stood in the doorway with a single bag at my feet, my hands numb from the rush of packing, my pulse thrumming in my throat. For years I had swallowed their barbs, smoothed over slights, answered insults with a brittle smile, because they were my husband's family, because marriage, I had been taught, required patience, because I wanted a home that felt whole. But patience has a limit, and that night the lid finally blew off. They had been whispering for months, little accusations tossed like boomerangs until even distant relatives began to repeat them. She's having an affair. She's not fit for our son. Words that begged belief because they were familiar, and cruelty that survived by being plausible. Each lie landed like a small stone against the glass wall I'd built around myself. Each one made me flinch more. Standing there, listening to their mockery, I felt all the old hurts and the slow erosion of dignity rise inside me like heat. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hit back. Instead, I gathered my things and moved like a quiet machine, deliberate and controlled. As I slipped out into the night, their voices chased me down the hallway, sharp, urgent, ordering me to leave faster. I could feel tears at the back of my eyes, hot and humiliating. I pressed them back with a hard, patient refusal. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. But beneath my calm a darker current was forming, something that had nothing to do with tears and everything to do with setting the record straight. Revenge, I thought then, not as a dramatic cry, but as a measured plan. I climbed into a taxi, the city lights slicing the darkness, and with my hands still trembling I called the number I'd been saving in my phone's notes. "Are you sure?" the voice on the other end asked, incredulous. "You just had that house built." "Yes," I said. "Sell everything. All of it." "My name is Amanda. I was the daughter of a man who died when I was very small, raised by my mother in a small rented flat. She worked 2 jobs, came home smelling of oil and detergent and a tired kind of pride, and she taught me how to keep my head down and my hands busy. College was a dream we couldn't afford. Work was the reality. I started as a clerk at a law firm run by a relative. The corners of the office smelled faintly of paper and coffee, and I loved the ordered rhythm of files and statutes. The law felt like a place to stand tall despite my lack of a degree. Years later, after long nights balancing ledgers and case files, I earned my place at the bar. It was quiet triumph, one footstep after another, until I could say, not with arrogance but with fact, I was a lawyer. Then Edward entered my life, polite, charming, the sort of man who carried his past like a loose coat, easy to shrug off. He was a widower, and Liam, his son, was a locked box of adolescent fear and exhaustion, studying for the one exam that promised a door open to the future. At Edward's request we moved in with his aging parents. I believed in family the way you believe in daylight, you accept it as given and reliable. I did not foresee cages. Living with them was less living and more service. They kept telling me, subtly at first and then with brazen bluntness, that a wife's place was in the home. Quit your job, they told me, as if labor were a moral failing for a woman. I worked because work kept me from dissolving into bitterness. It paid the bills. It paid for small kindnesses. It kept me awake at night with plans instead of resentments. But they would not see that. To them, I was a convenience dressed in skin. I cooked. I cleaned. I scrubbed plates until the metal shone. Still I was called a parasite, a worthless woman. The small blow that broke something inside us all came from a phone bill. I found charges, hundreds of dollars vanishing into in-app purchases, a child's hunger sitting behind glossy avatars and digital coins. I confronted Liam with the bill, expecting embarrassment, an apology, a promise to be more careful. He glared instead, belligerent, entitled. He stormed down the hallway to his grandparents and told them I had, severely, scolded him. In minutes the household had reassembled itself into a tribunal and I, bewilderingly, was the accused. They berated me in front of relatives. They humiliated me at the very dinner meant to celebrate Liam's acceptance into university, an acceptance I had not even been told about. Instead of being invited to the celebration, I was ordered to cook for a roomful of people who had been prepared by my in-laws to see me as a laughingstock. The sting of that betrayal burned as hot as any slap. When Liam spat to my face that he didn't consider me his mother, That he resented my place in the house. Something in me that had learned restraint snapped. I could have let the insults stand. I could have lived with the slow suffocation of their control, metered showers, rationed electricity, criticism for each breath I took. But I had worked too hard for too long to allow my life to be shaped solely by other people's contempt. So when I left that night with one bag and a plan, it was not because I lacked love for a family. It was because I loved myself enough to take back what was mine. Selling the house was not dramatic, it was careful, lawful, coldly efficient. I had paid for the land. I had signed the deeds. When my in-laws called me at dawn with outrage and accusations of theft, I let them sputter in rage. I mailed them the paperwork. I sent them my business card with the title I had earned through years of study and work, attorney at law, knowing their faces would pale at a truth they had assumed impossible, that I had agency, education, and the means to act. The confrontation at the hospital the next day was the beginning of unspooling. I walked into Edward's room and saw him, embracing a young woman, a foolish tableau of desire and consequence. I presented my evidence, the investigator's report, video clips, records of whispered intrusions and petty thefts that showed them for what they were. Their shock was delicious and then ridiculous. The same faces that had hurled slurs at me now begged forgiveness from me, trying to smooth their way back into comfort and roof. Edward's prayers, his apologies, slid off me like rain on glass. I did not want to humiliate them. I wanted to be free. I wanted accountability. When I filed the eviction and the sale went through, when I took civil action for harassment and infidelity and was awarded a modest compensation, I did not dance on anyone's ruin. I moved into an apartment I could make my own, small, bright, the walls finally mine to hang pictures upon. I furnished it with the meager proceeds and the knowledge that I had chosen myself. Liam's eventual knock at my office door, humbled, ashamed, asking for help with tuition, was a bitter symmetry. I refused him then, not because I wanted revenge, but because boundaries are lessons. He would find his way through hard work or he would learn the cost of entitlement. Edward and his family ended up in a cramped public unit. They would tell people that the fish that got away was enormous. Human pride is a cheap but stubborn garment. Now, when I wake in the morning in my own quiet kitchen, the light comes in at an angle I recognize as belonging to me. My days are full of clients and small victories for the powerless, cases where empathy and diligence make a difference. I do not boast. The memory of their scorn is a scar, but it is one I wear with the knowledge that I refused to be small. I had been mocked, dismissed, and betrayed, but because I chose to stand up, to use what I had earned, I reclaimed a life that belongs to nobody but me. House, because my in-laws spread lies about me having an affair. Even the relatives believed their words. Their outrageous accusations burned inside me like fire, and I felt as though I might explode from all the feelings I had been forced to suppress for years. What had I done to deserve this? I had endured their cold looks, their harsh words, and their endless contempt only because they were my husband's family. I told myself again and again that patience was better than conflict. But that day, something inside me finally snapped. I understand your point, I said with a calmness that surprised even me. Since you clearly don't want such an incompetent wife, I'll prepare to leave soon. I waited until the celebration party ended and all the relatives had gone home. My in-laws were sitting in the living room, smug after a night of laughter at my expense. That was when I spoke those words directly to them. "Oh, you finally came to your senses," my mother-in-law replied instantly, her lips curling into a satisfied smile. She looked almost triumphant, as if she had been waiting years to hear me say I would leave. So the useless housekeeper has finally decided to go. Now that Liam has been accepted to university, we don't need you anymore. Thanks for your work until now. You were just here to take care of Liam until he got into college. It'll be nice to have more space once this parasite is gone. Did you really think someone with just a high school education could become part of our family? Both she and my father-in-law burst into laughter. Their expressions were ugly, filled with malice, and in that moment, I realized they would never change. They had never once seen me as family, only as a tool. "That's enough," I said firmly, standing up. "Thank you for everything until now." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult them back. Instead, I quietly went to my room and began packing my belongings. Behind me, I could hear their gleeful voices urging me to hurry up and get out. Tears welled in my eyes. But I was determined not to let them see me cry. With only the bare minimum of belongings in my suitcase, I walked out of that house. At the curb, I called a taxi. The cool night air hit my face, and in that moment, something inside me shifted. The years of humiliation, the lies, the false accusations, they all mixed into one dark, sharp thought: revenge. When I got into the taxi, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I had memorized long ago. It was a real estate company. "I'm selling all of that land and building," I said clearly. "What? Are you sure? You just had it built for 2 families to live together?" the agent asked, clearly shocked. "Yes," I replied without hesitation. "List it immediately." That house, built so recently for us to live together as family, had been nothing but a cage. Selling it wasn't just business, it was justice. I knew it would hit them where it hurt the most. The very next morning, my phone rang violently. It was my in-laws. What is the meaning of this? Explain yourself right now," my father-in-law roared, his voice shaking with fury. Apparently, the real estate company had already contacted them. I could almost imagine the shock on their faces when they realized the house was being listed. "How dare you sell this house on your own? Did you steal the deed? We'll report you to the police right now. Be prepared." They cursed at me, calling me a thief, a liar, but their ignorance was almost laughable. "I didn't steal anything," I said coolly. "The land and building are registered in my name. I paid all the construction costs too. You know nothing about me." There was a pause, then bursts of disbelieving laughter. "Don't make us laugh. Someone with just a high school education like you couldn't possibly have that kind of money. Stop lying." "If you don't believe me," I said, "why don't you ask the real estate agent standing right there with you?" On the other end, I heard the agent confirm, "Yes, this property is indeed registered under Amanda Sama's name." The silence that followed was delicious. Then came the frantic voices. "Lies. You must be in on this. This is fraud. Our son is an elite employee. There's no way he would let such a thing happen." But here was the truth they didn't know. Edward, my husband, was no elite. Though he put on his suit every morning and pretended to go to work, he had been fired over a year ago. His company had dismissed him for misconduct, cheating with multiple young women at work. Since then, he had only done odd jobs, earning barely anything. It had been me, yes, the useless housekeeper, who had been carrying more than 90% of the family's expenses. I had stayed silent to protect him, foolishly giving him one last chance after he begged for forgiveness. But that silence had only strengthened his parents' false belief that he was a successful man and I was a leech. The irony was bitter. "For someone with just a high school education, you're still a liar," my in-laws shouted, clinging to their delusions. I sighed. There was no point in arguing with people who refused to see the truth. "I'll mail you the documents later," I said. "Once you see them, even you will have to admit the truth." "Documents? What documents?" "You'll know when they arrive." And with that, I ended the call. Later that week, I mailed an official eviction notice along with my business card. On the card, printed in bold letters, was my title: Attorney at Law. Yes, I had never gone to university because of family circumstances, but I had worked tirelessly, passed the preliminary bar exam, and then passed the national bar on my first attempt. I was not some parasite. I was a lawyer, a fact I had never flaunted, but one they would now be forced to face. And for the first time in years, I smiled.